Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, POTS Lines, Facts, Risks, and Future Options. I'm Jennifer Getz, the Editorial Director of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar is presented by Ooma. Before we get started, I'll cover a few housekeeping items. There will be a question and answer segment at the end of the presentation today. Please find the question box in the dashboard on your screen. This is where you can submit questions for our speaker today. If at any time you experience a technical difficulty, please send us a message via that question section and someone on our team will answer you privately. Now, without further ado, I'm happy to introduce your speaker for today. Clinton Fitch is the Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships for Ooma, where he is responsible for strategic partnership nurturing and development. He has over 2 decades of experience in unified communications and nearly 15 years in corporate development and strategic partnerships with broad technical, sales, project management, and business model skills. Clinton, thank you so much for joining us today.
You bet, Jennifer. Thank you, and thanks everyone for attending. So we're going to be talking today about POTS, and if you're not familiar with that term, it's plain old telephone service. So think copper lines that you used to have in your house for your home phone, or maybe your desk at work, but there's still a lot of those copper lines that are out there for other devices. And those are going away, and they're going away at a pretty good clip now at this point. So this all started back in August of 2019. The FCC released a statement and then an order that allowed for the public switched telephone network, PSTN, to be sunset. And PSTN and POTS are kind of synonymous. They are the same thing in many ways. And that order went into effect in August of 2022. What that did is a few things. It gave the incumbent carriers who own these copper networks the ability to start decommissioning these networks for alternative services or just eliminating the services altogether. And it gave them also the ability to charge whatever they want. Remember that POTS and public switch telephone network for a long time was a very regulated business. A lot of those handcuffs came off in 2022. And while it was a slow roll from 22 to really about mid-year last year, the rate at which these lines are now being decommissioned is faster than it's ever been, and it's only going to accelerate. So to give you some perspective of what I'm talking about, this chart is from telegeography, and it'll give you an idea. In 2005, there were almost 171 million POTS lines in the United States. If you look at 2023, we're down to 11.6 million. And here in 2025, through the midpoint of this year, we now are probably at less than 10 million. So this is happening at a good clip, and it's happening across the country. It's not just one particular area. It's not one particular incumbent carrier that has the copper and so forth. It's across the board. And if you look at this map, this is from the FCC. This is where notifications of decommissions have happened. So if you're in a red state, the incumbent carrier has notified the FCC that they are decommissioning those copper lines in that state. In some area of the state, doesn't necessarily mean the entire state, just means that a notification has gone out. If you're in one of the handful of gray, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And then as a sidebar to this, we at Ooma, we pay a lot of attention to this because it impacts us as a business and it impacts our customers and our partners. We have gone from seeing 50, 60 notifications a quarter to over 200 a quarter pretty consistently now. So if you haven't gotten a notification from your carrier, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And it's probably going to happen sooner rather than later. The other challenge that the incumbent carriers are having is copper theft. So this is something that's been going on for a while now, for the last 10, 15 years, but it's really accelerated as well. So the copper in many ways is more valuable than silver from a market and resellability factor. Nobody really kind of questions if raw copper comes into a recycling facility. So they're facing a lot of challenges around that. Those lines are being cut and the copper's being pulled out. This has a knock-on effect. Is you as a customer, if your line gets cut, the incumbent carrier now doesn't necessarily have to go and repair that line. They can just let it be, or they can come to you as a customer and say, well, we're really sorry that your alarm got cut, your alarm line got cut. If you want us to roll a truck, it'll be, $5,000, $10,000, whatever the case may be. So that's one side of the copper story. The other side of the copper story for the incumbents are they have billions of dollars invested in these networks, and they want to recoup this copper themselves. So as they start switching off central offices, as they start replacing things with fiber or with twist or Ethernet or whatever the case may be, they're pulling the copper out themselves to get that money back from that. So it's a two-edged sword when it comes to that aspect of it. The impact for customers is the increase in price. So as the quality of the networks go away, as the decommissioning of these networks continues to happen, the incumbent carriers are trying to get folks to move along. And so what they're doing is they're just raising prices. So this is a real bill, a real example of a bill that went up over 780% in 1 month. And this is a forcing function, obviously, but it is something that the carriers can do. It is something that they can do, and they do not have to ask permission. Remember, the handcuffs are off now. So all the regulatory pieces around pricing and those kind of things, they're gone. So if a carrier wants to raise the price 800% month over month, they can continue to do it. And there's no mechanism in government to stop them from doing that. And we're seeing those increases. This is an egregious example, but we're seeing 50, 60, 70% increases month over month, pretty much all the time. So if you haven't had your bill go up, again, it will. It's just a matter of when they get to you and where you happen to be located, your facilities happen to be located, and so forth. So where are these POTS lines that I'm talking about? I'm not talking about desk phones, right? Those have pretty much been replaced, whether they be at home or whether they be in the office. Those have been replaced by companies like Ooma and other companies in the UCaaS space. What I'm talking about are what I tend to call the difficult to replace lines. So fire alarm panels, high volume fax machines, elevators, public safety phones, gate entry systems, et cetera. These lines tend to be kind of tucked away and forgotten about. There's a device connected to them, but nobody really knows where it ends up terminating, those kind of things. And those lines have been there in some cases 30, 40, 50 years. So they're a little bit challenging to replace. And a lot of UCaaS carriers, again, like Ooma and others, we've kind of left these alone back in the day because they were difficult to replace. And in some cases, like elevators, for example, or safety phones, those are life safety systems that are involved. UCaaS solutions really aren't life safety system certified for POTS replacement. And so it was left alone. And now it's a matter of it can't be left alone because these lines will go away. And there's all kinds of implications for businesses. So if you have a facility and you don't have an emergency phone in your elevator, technically you're not supposed to run that elevator. If you have a fire alarm panel that gets disconnected, its POTS line gets disconnected, and there's a fire, your insurance could deny the claim. So there's a lot of knock-on impacts that happen to businesses across all of these different types of devices. And this is just a small sample of what I'm talking about. Think about IoT devices that monitor refrigeration or HVAC or something like that. Those all, generally speaking, have a POTS line tied to them, and they're going away. So the challenge that folks are facing with POTS lines are pretty vast, right? So this is a survey that was done by Foundry that Ooma sponsored, and that we asked the questions, what are the challenges? And the number one challenge was increase in cost. Over 50% said that was a challenge, but they also said integrating with new technologies. They have a new fire alarm panel, and the POTS lines just doesn't work with a POTS line. And then there was vendor issues or decreased reliability. Again, as these networks are going away and being decommissioned, they're not being repaired or they're not being maintained like they were before. The other side of that too is that a lot of the folks who built those networks, they're retiring out of the workforce at this point. So younger folks who are coming in don't necessarily know how to work with POTS networks because they've never had to. And so that's a challenge as well. And then scalability is an issue as well. So my first question for you is, what do you think are the biggest reasons people want to keep their POTS lines? So we put up a poll. I'm going to leave it up here for just a few seconds. If you could answer this, and you could choose multiple answers here, but what are the reasons that people are keeping them? Is it not broken? Is it compliant? Is it wireless services not available, et cetera? So if you'll take just a moment and check any of those that apply to you, that would be great. Then once we have enough answers here over the next minute or so, then we'll show the answers of this audience and see where everybody is in their path to POTS replacement. I'll give you just a few more seconds. All right, well, let's see where everybody is on this, see where everybody's facing it. So number one answer is it's not broken, and that's a common answer that we see. And it's reliable, concerned about compliance, and so forth. So those are the top three out of the answers, but it seemed like the vast majority of folks, it's not broken, so not going to worry about it. All right, thanks for answering that poll question. So let's go to the myths and the facts about POTS lines and keeping those POTS lines. So if it's not broken, it will be at some point. It either is or it will be. As I've said, the carriers are decommissioning these networks. So if it hasn't impacted you, if it hasn't impacted one of your facilities, it's a matter of time and when it will. And it can also be a situation where you get really short notice. We've had instances where customers or partners of ours have had customers who have been told they have to move their POTS lines in 10 days or 30 days or something like that. So it will break at some point. It will go away if nothing else. The reliability I've already kind of addressed. Because the networks are going away, the reliability is going away as well. And one of the myths about POTS replacement solutions like Ooma's AirDial solution is that it's not compliant, that compliancy will suffer, life safety systems and so forth. At least with our solution, that is not the case. We are certified with ASME for elevators, NFPA for fire alarm panels, and a whole slew of others, including the New York Fire Department, California Fire Marshal, et cetera. So we designed our solution in particular to be compliant from day one, so compliancy won't suffer. With wireless not service being available, again, we've got a solution that has wireless as well as Ethernet and so forth. I won't read down the whole list, but a lot of the things that have held folks back on making the decision to move forward on a POTS replacement solution, some of these have already happened to them or they will be. And again, the number one thing we see is expense. The bills come up and they get more and more expensive month over month. So what are your options? So the options are you can stay status quo, right? I always say hope's not an option. You can hope that the problem won't come this month or next month or the next quarter or whatever, but the reality is it will at some point. AT&T, who is the second biggest copper network in the United States, have said they're going to be out of this business by 2029. Verizon, who's the other big one out there, have said they haven't given a date, but they pretty much said we're getting out of this business. So it's going to happen. So you can stay for now, but it is going to cost you more, and then you can have the concern around reliability and so forth. You can rip and replace. That's not really viable for large organizations or even small organizations going and ripping out, fire alarm panels and replacing elevators and everything. So you don't have to use the POTS lines. It's not really viable. So there's a third alternative, finding a replacement, a POTS replacement solution that allows you to keep all of the things that you need keep going in your facility. So that's where our AirDial comes in. So Ooma AirDial is specifically built for these POTS lines that I'm talking about. We specifically built it to replace elevator, phone, copper lines, for fire alarm panels, door entry systems, door kings, those kind of things. We have LTE as well as Ethernet built into it. We have technology that allows us to replicate the traffic across both wired and wireless at the same time. It's a patented technology. And we have a completely configurable device that in many cases auto configures itself once it detects what's on the other end of the line, but it also can be configured to work with whatever device you have. We've got tens of thousands of these units out now in the market, in the real world. And we haven't found anything that we can't work with. We might have to tweak here and there, but we can do that. And the benefit, one of the benefits of our solution is that it is an all-in-one box that we design. We design the hardware, we design the software. It's not a rack and stack. It's quite literally one box. And each box can support up to 4 FXS ports or 4 POTS lines. And then you can manage all of that from one web portal. You can manage all the ports, you can manage the wireless, you can manage the wired, notifications, etc. Everything through what we call remote device management, or RDM. So for my second question, then, where are you on your POTS replacement journey? So another poll, this one's a little bit shorter, but where are you? Where's your organization? Are you in the process of searching for alternative solutions? Have you already begun the process? Do you have a plan? Are you not started yet? So take a couple of seconds, answer that question for me. We'll leave it open again for a few seconds, and then we'll talk about the answers to those as well. Right. All right, let's see where everybody is. So you're almost half are researching a POTS replacement solution. That's great. And you're evaluating vendors. That's great. If you've selected, that's terrific. If you're on the bottom of this, we plan to continue analog lines, or we don't have a plan yet, or you're not sure, you're the folks that can be in a little bit of trouble, right? So the challenge here is that with these lines going away and you being in a situation where they may go away very quickly, you might be stuck in a queue to get it replaced. So if you haven't started a plan, I highly encourage you to start looking at the solution. Even if your organization has decided for now you're going to stay with those analog lines, eventually they're going to go away and you're going to need to have a plan. So start working on that plan now. If nothing else comes out of this for you today, start working on that, because you're going to need it at some point, whether it be this month or this quarter or next year or 2 years from now. You'll need it at some point. All right, so the answers you gave pretty much matched what we found from Foundry as well. So a lot of folks are researching, a lot of people are evaluating vendors, a lot of people have already selected this solution. And again, a small percentage that don't have a plan yet. I would encourage you to start working on that plan. It'll come in handy when the day comes that you need to start replacing these lines. So why are people looking at POTS replacements now? Reliability, I've shared a couple of times. Again, these networks going away, they're not being serviced and managed the way that are maintained the way that they were. Availability is becoming more and more of an issue as well. We're running into a lot of opportunities. Both Ooma direct as well as our strategic partners are running into opportunities where a chain of quick service restaurants, they're building a new location. They cannot get copper in the new location. It's in a new subdivision, or it's in an older subdivision, but that subdivision has been converted to fiber or whatever the case may be. And POTS simply isn't a solution for them. It's not available. It's not even an option. So that's becoming more and more of an issue. We're seeing that, to be fair, Midwest and West. In the East Coast, not so much, but we're seeing that in the middle of the country, West. So it's not there. It's just not an option on those. Avoiding the disconnections. They're getting notices, or they're not getting notices, in a timely fashion, and they have to make a decision. And then there's cost cutting. I can't tell you how many CFOs I've talked to or accounting teams that I've talked to where the phone bill was kind of noise in the background, and then all of a sudden they realized that they had been paying exponentially more over the course of however many months or however many quarters, and they realized that they needed to make a changing just to change the overall cost for the business. And then there's the traffic jam that I mentioned earlier, right? If you haven't started a plan, you really are going to run into the traffic jam, not just with us, but there's other POTS replacement solutions that are out there that are you're going to be at the back of the queue, and so that could be impactful of your business and business continuity, being able to have door systems work or elevators work, that kind of thing. So what are the critically important factors for migrating? Reliability and uptime. Those are the number one thing for sure. And then compliance is up there. Integration with existing technologies and devices. We have a lot of customers, a lot of facilities that have 20, 30-year-old fire alarm panels or security systems or whatever the case may be. We have done a significant amount of fingerprinting of those devices with Ooma, AirDial, and we haven't found one we can't work with. So making sure that you can work with what you have instead of having to go and replace, that helps from a cost perspective as well. Business disruption is obviously an impact too. If you're in a facility that has an elevator and you can't run that elevator, that has an impact on folks, and that has an impact on the business. And then there's a smattering of others. I won't read the whole list, but you get the idea. There's a lot of factors that go into the decision-making process around what POTS replacement solution to choose. So charting a path forward, it's really 4 steps. And this is how Ooma looks at it. This is how we go to market with it. And this is how we talk to our customers. This is how our partners talk to their customers as well. It's around discovery, selection, installation, and management. So from a discovery perspective, this is something that we can do for you, or one of our partners can do for you, or something you can do yourself. So how many POTS lines do you have? That sounds like a simple question. We find an awful lot of customers who don't know how many POTS lines they have. So one of the easiest things that you can do is just get a copy of your phone bill. It might be going into your telecom team, or it might be going directly into accounts payable. It might be going into your IT team, wherever that bill goes. Get a copy of that bill and then start working line by line. What is this line connected to? What is this line connected to? This is for the fax machine, or this is for the elevator, or this is for the IoT sensors, et cetera, et cetera. What we find and what our customers find, especially customers who have been in a facility for a long period of time, that they have POTS lines that they're replacing that are not, or that are they're paying for, that they have not had a device connected to, and nobody knows how long. So they're paying in some cases for 5, 10, 15, 20 lines that have not been used, that haven't been used in years, but they've still been paying for them. So that has an immediate impact. So even if you're in the process of working on your POTS replacement strategy, your plan, even if you go through and do just a simple audit, you may find that your company is paying for lines that you don't need, that you can go and terminate with your carrier now, and that can see some immediate cost savings right there. We can, of course, help you do this too, right? But a lot of our customers, they have quick access to this, and so they can do it. Then finding out where they're located. We have had customers who have had lines that the building has gone through a remodel or whatever. They do this audit, they find out they've got a line, they find out that it's on floor 2, but they find out that it was sheetrocked in 15 years ago, and they've been paying for it, and there's actually it's there, but it's not, right? So finding out where things are located is also important. Knowing what equipment is connected to them, elevators or fax or whatever the case may be, and then deciding what needs to be replaced, right? The one thing about AirDial, and the one thing that we as Ooma approach it, and our partners approach it this way as well, is we have a crawl, walk, run mentality to it, unless you have to run, unless you've gotten a disconnection notice, right? But if you are in the process of planning, or you have a plan, you can phase this process in, right? So maybe building one floor one week, building 1 floor 2 the next week, building 2 floor 1 the third week, etc. It's not a situation where you have to go and replace all of it at once. That not only allows for budgetary planning, but that also allows for the technology planning as well, making sure that you can do the testing, make sure that you really need that fax machine, or you find those lines that you don't need. We don't need to move something that you're not using, right? And then coming up with that plan. So you can do it a variety of different ways. We have customers who have one building and they'll do it all within a week, or they have one floor, they'll do it within a day. We can work at your pace, and we can work with you, and our partners can work with you on what makes sense for your organization. If you have a multi-building campus, or you have multiple multi-building campuses, we have a lot of customers that are that way. We can work in those different locations and do one at a time, or we can do 2 or 3 at a time, whatever works for you. We're flexible as far as that is concerned, but I want to be really clear. It's not a situation where you have to go and do all the buildings in one day, or you have to do all the buildings in 1 week. You can approach it in a phased approach to make it a little bit easier, but also to make sure that you are not missing any steps along the way. So once you've got the discovery piece done, then it becomes a selection, right, process. And so what does it look like? What's the procurement time for the number of devices that you need? What is the reliability and uptime of the vendor that you're selecting? Ooma, we have been in the copper, or the POTS replacement business for 25 years or 20 years now. This is something we have always done. We started in the residential space, and we have moved in the SMB and the enterprise space. So reliability and uptime is critical for us. We have multiple data centers for our network. We have 2.5 million users that are on our network. So reliability and uptime is just part and parcel of who we are and what we do. And then I've mentioned the regulatory compliance. If you replace a POTS line that is attached to a life safety system in some way, it needs to meet the requirements around that. So if it's ASME for elevators, it has to have a battery backup. Well, AirDial has a battery backup that's built into it and lasts up to 24 hours. You need to have the ability to record or see the calls that are coming in and out from a regulatory perspective, and so forth. We are UL 861 certified as well. So we've gone through underwriter laboratories for our device. So we have a slew of those compliance certifications to make sure that we will work with pretty much anything. Integrating with your existing systems, talked a little bit about that. Ripping and replacing really isn't an option for some organizations. So we want to make sure that we can work on that with those existing devices, and we want to make sure that we minimize the service disruptions, right? We want to work with you so you have the ability to install this when you need to, but once the device is installed, making sure that you don't have a disruption, right? So if you're connected into your local network and that goes down, we have Ethernet as a backup, or we can have it just purely on wireless on LTE if you want to go that way. We support either model. But then if you have both wired and wireless, we have a technology called multipath, which allows us to have the voice go down both the wired and wireless at the same time. So if one drops, the call continues, and it doesn't drop. There's no re-registration required and those kind of things. Feature set becomes important, right? So this needs to have phone-like functionality. So it has things like call waiting, and it has things like voicemail and those kind of things. So it can be used for fax machines and that kind of stuff. And then scalability. As I said, we've got a network that's behind this. It's got 2.5 million people on it, 2.5 million users that use the system. So we have the scalability both here in the US and abroad. So from an installation perspective, it comes down to if you need to port your numbers. We do thousands of ports a day. Remember, we're a telephony service. So we port numbers all the time. We can port those numbers. That's not really that important so much for fire alarm panels or alarm panels or door entry systems. If you have a monitoring service, they need to know that number, but you don't necessarily have to port the number over if you don't want to. For fax machines, particularly those that have been published to the public, you definitely want to port those. So we have a whole process that we port these numbers over. We provide temporary numbers until the port happens, and then the port, we just replace it with the real number, if you will. And depending on the carrier, that can take from 2 days to 14 days. It just depends on them more than us. But that is something that you can initiate yourself in the remote device management portal as well. And then you'll need to do testing. We'll want to make sure that we work with you on testing, make sure we test devices, get it in a lab if need be, whatever, and then working with you to avoid that downtime. So if your maintenance windows are in the morning or in the evening or whatever the case may be, we can do that. We can work with you. We have a 24/7, 365 support team that can be there on call and can be there with you as you're working through this. If you're doing an install yourself, or if we're doing the install, they'll have support remotely as well to help diagnose anything that comes up or anything that needs to be tweaked to make sure that it works. The one thing I will tell you about the LTE on this as well is that this is considered an IoT device. So we don't necessarily need like 5 bars like you do on your mobile phone. So we can have a really reasonable signal to noise ratio and be just fine. So the picture that's actually on this slide is from Boston. It's an older building this is in the basement where their blocks were, their 66 blocks. And we were able to work with this just fine, right? So you don't have to have a super powerful, like I said, mobile phone type signal for this to work. It'll work with even a minimal signal. We're not pumping that much data out on this, so it's going to be just fine as far as that's concerned. RDM, remote device management, allows you to manage every aspect of every AirDial that is in your environment, whether it be at one location or multiple locations or on different floors of a building, etc. So you can remotely monitor and manage all of those devices. You can make configuration changes. You can see the call logs. You can see what's going on. You can delegate responsibilities to different folks within your organization. You can know when emergency calls have been placed. And then you can see things like battery, LTE, and WAN signal, and so forth. One of the key things about AirDial is the notifications. So we allow you to notify both on events and on call events. So if the device, as I said earlier, has a built-in battery, if the device goes on power, or goes off of power and goes on to battery, you can get notified. You can be notified by email, you can be notified by SMS, or both. And then if it goes back on AC, you get notified as well. So there's things like that, right? LTE signal goes away or whatever the case may be. We can also do it on call events. So let's say you have AirDial in your in your elevator, and somebody pushes the emergency call button and a call happens. We can send a notification that a call happened in elevator 1 or that a call to 911 happened on the 2nd floor, and you can be notified as facility manager that happened. That way you can proactively manage that situation instead of waiting until emergency services roll up and you're not real sure why they're there. So we're one of the few that do that, and we allow you to configure that and however you need and however you want. It's part of the solution. You don't pay extra for that. It's built in. But it is one of the things that really differentiates our solution from some of the others that are out there. So what's the easiest path to POTS replacement? Let us help you with that process, right? AirDial is an all-in-one solution. We can help you with end-to-end assessment all the way to installation. We can work with you to do that. We can help you with the assessment. You do the installation or vice versa. And we have built it on a network that has over 2 million users. We're award-winning for this solution and have been for the last few years. So there's nothing we can't really handle with AirDial when it comes to replacing those old copper lines. So if you have any questions, if you want some consultation, if you want some help kind of getting just the building blocks around what does your migration plan need to look like, what does your strategy need to look like, just go to ooma.com/AirDial, or you can scan the QR code. That'll put you in contact with one of our team. We can help you. If you have a partner who helps you with your telecom, chances are they're selling AirDial as well, and you can also reach out to them and they can help you too. So I want to thank you for your time this morning and this afternoon. And I think, Jennifer, we're going to open up for any questions that came in.
Absolutely. Well, Clinton, thank you so much for this informative presentation. And I want to thank our attendees that have already been sending in questions. So Clinton, I guess we can get started with some of our first questions. So
Sure.
what is the best way to ensure that lines are connected and working in all installed locations with AirDial?
Well, so you'll be able to see that as soon as you plug the line in, right? So you'll configure the port for the phone number and what it's connected to, and so forth, whether it's a modem or whether it's IP, et cetera. And then when you plug the device in, you're going to know pretty quickly that it's working, and you can make test calls and those kind of things too. A lot of times for fire alarm panels, we encourage you to get a hold of your fire alarm company. They can do a test signal or something along those lines on those as well. But yeah, you're pretty much going to know when it's working as soon as you plug the device in. If support needs to get involved and help, if it's a really old panel, usually this comes into play on really, really old fire alarm panels. Support may need to do a little tweak behind the scenes, but 95% of the time it's plug and play kind of goes.
Perfect. So another question we have here is we engaged lots of building fire alarm projects. Is Ooma a qualified managed facility-based voice network, otherwise known as MFVN, provider from a fire alarm signal perspective?
Excellent question. And yes, we are. We are at MFVN with multiple carriers here in the US, including T-Mobile, US Cellular, which is now T-Mobile, with Verizon and AT&T. So yeah, we have MFVN private connections. One of the things around this, and the genesis of this question, whoever asked it, in order to be ASME and NFPA compliant, it cannot touch the public network. The data cannot touch the public network. That's where MFVN comes in. So yes, we have that, and we are good with any carrier on that.
Perfect. Awesome. So what about getting pots from cable carriers? They provide pots through their Copes plant. This is one question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's certainly possible. The limitations there is that none of the cable providers have a solution that is either certified, like we were just speaking about, right? Don't have an MFVN or whatever when it comes to the last mile, dropping off the call at the last mile, which we do. We're encrypted end to end. The other thing is getting the statistics or getting the information out of that, the analytics. They may not be available. And it may be that they don't have something, that it may be only the cable itself that they have, but they don't have a redundant pass. So maybe not have a cellular connection or something along those lines. So you can do it for sure. And we have customers that do it, but I will tell you that we do replace a lot of those, to be honest, because they need more information, or they need more granularity, or it's just not working the way that they need it to for their particular organization.
Good to know. Good to know. Another question is around battery backup for power failure.
Yeah. So AirDial has a built-in battery. So for things like ASME and NFPA, we have to have battery backup built into the device. It is user replaceable, by the way. It's a lithium ion cell, right? So lithium ions, like the batteries in your phone, are going to die at some point too, right? So they all have a life, but it's user replaceable. And we also have an extension pack on that. So if you can, that plugs into the back of the device, that will allow you to get up to 24 hours of battery backup on the device. So that'll run it. That'll run the cellular modems, and so you can continue calls with that with no problem.
Awesome. Now, is Ooma viable in the government space?
We are, absolutely, yeah. So government's got different fur than other solutions, right? So our different industries, we would need to understand the opportunity to make sure that we have the compliance that is required. But yes, we do work in the government space. We also work in SLED, state, local, and education in almost every state at this point. We've got a solution in there. So yeah.
Great, great. Now, another question we have here is there's a lot of options we've looked at, data remote, as an
Mhm.
example. What really sets you apart from them the most? Or like the options kind of similar?
Yeah, so I always am careful when I pick on a poke a competitor, right? Because we try to be friendly to each other. What I would tell you, the difference for us are a few things. One, it's our solution, right? So we're not racking and stacking a bunch of different things together and putting them into one box. This is our board. We design it literally from the motherboard up, kind of thing, right? The industrial design, everything is ours. So we designed that solution. We designed the firmware that runs on it. We designed the external software, the RDM side of it as well. Everything is us. So you're not having to figure out what component is not working or playing nice in the sandbox. So you've got everything there, and everything is in RDM. So you're going to know what's going on or what's happening or not happening correctly. The other thing that I would say is we have a much more robust answer when it comes to compliance, and we have a much more robust answer when it comes to notifications. The ability to give you a text message or an email when somebody calls 911 in a building is a big deal. And we have really focused on making sure that we make that as reliable as possible, and we make sure that it can go to however many people that you need, whether it be a distribution or an individual. So there are other things, but those are kind of the highlights. But again, because we own all of it, so to speak, it's we kind of have the Apple approach to this in that we design the hardware and the software. It allows us to control that experience much more than some of the other competitive solutions that are out there.
Mhm. Very cool. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Another question we have are what UL listings for fire alarm service has AirDial received?
I know we have 861. I don't have those particular numbers on off the top. We've got 3 or 4 different ones. If you reach out to uma.com/airdial, they can give you the full list, the whole laundry list of all the certifications that we have, not just the ULs, but the others as well.
Perfect. When changing an elevator POTS line, does any equipment have to be changed in the elevator, or is it just grabbing the line to the elevator?
It's just really grabbing the line to the elevator. The question that we usually run into with elevators is where we're going to put the air dial unit itself. Are we going to put it in the cab? Or are we going to put it on top of the cab? Or are we going to put it at the top of the elevator shaft? If it's a small building, 2 floors or something like that. That's really the question. Just locating where those lines terminate on the cab, and then putting the air dial in that general vicinity. So there's nothing that necessarily has to be replaced in the sense of we're just becoming the pots for it instead of the copper that's connected to the cab.
Mhm. Awesome. So another question we have here is, I'm a reseller of other competitor solutions and your options seem better. How can I go about becoming an Ooma partner?
So you can talk to Clinton, and we can help you with that. Yeah. So the best thing for you to do would be go to uma.com/airdial and tell them that you want to talk to somebody in strategic partnerships about reselling, and they'll put you in contact with me or one of my team members.
Perfect. Thank you. One person says, should I expect to save money relative to my POTS provider?
Yeah, 100%. The savings are going to be um, immediately, right? So it depends. The you know the answer carries different freight for different folks, right? Because if you're paying $100 a line, the savings will be there. Substantial savings will be there, but
Mhm.
the ROI will take a little bit longer. If you're paying $1,000 a line, yeah, it's going to be really quick, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, the cost savings is immediate when you do it, because the solution from a costing perspective is lower than any of the POS lines that are out there. And then the other thing that I'll harken back to is if you haven't done a discovery of where your POTS lines are, even if you're still working on your plan, go do a discovery of the POTS lines that you have that you're paying for, and see if there's any that you can get rid of because you may be paying for something that you don't actually use. So yeah, that could be some cost savings too. But when it comes to POTS replacement, yeah, you'll see savings the first month. That just is a
Mhm.
multiple of however many lines we're replacing.
Perfect. Now, one other question is, what happens when the cell signal goes down, like, for example, during a wildfire or something?
Yeah, okay. So there's a couple different answers to this. If you have the AirDial connected to Ethernet to your LAN, then we'll use that. If you are using mobile only, then there's two SIMs that are in the device. We will go to the second SIM and see if we can get a signal there, right? Now, in the case of a wildfire, that's an extreme example, right? Chances are everybody's cell tower is on fire, right? So we're probably, and there's probably bigger concerns like getting people out versus, that kind of thing. But it is a dual SIM device. So we'll hone into whoever the carrier is on the first. We usually go with T-Mobile on the first SIM, and then on the second SIM it could be Verizon, AT&T. It was US Cellular, but again, that's now T-Mobile. So yeah.
Mhm. Perfect. Well, one other question we have is, do you offer support or management of these lines, or is it self-managed?
So we, as a Ooma, we don't provide it in that we've handed over to you and you manage it yourself. However, we have a lot of strategic partners who do the management of the environments for you.
Mhm.
So you can reach out to ooma.com/airdial, say that you're looking for a managed service around this. That'll come to me or somebody on my team, and we can help you with that too.
Perfect. Yeah. And I think that kind of aligns well with our next question of who is available to contact if I need support for the device.
Yeah, so our support system is 24/7 by 365. And we follow the sun as well. And so we are more than equipped to deal with it. We've got a team dedicated just to AirDial inside of our support organization, then just like we do for our SMB solutions and our residential solutions and so forth. So they're there for you, whether it is a matter of a configuration question, whether it is a during install if something comes up, they're there for you to help you out.
Perfect. Perfect. So, and one other question is, how reliable is Ooma AirDial when compared to POTS lines themselves?
Yeah, so it's a moving target these days because there was a time, admittedly, that POTS lines were pretty much nailed up, right? They were rock solid networks. As time has gone on, especially since 2023, 24 is when we really started seeing a lot of customers, new customers to us coming and saying, the quality of the service has gone down or the lines had been cut or that kind of thing. Um, we're 5 nines on our network, right? 99.99999. So we've got that on our side, and we have had that for a long time. That's what this is running on. So relatively speaking, we're going to be more reliable than a lot of areas that are serviced by POTS now.
Mhm. Perfect. Well, Clinton, it looks like we have time for about one more question. So,
Okay.
does Ooma AirDial allow me to remain more compliant than POTS lines?
It can now. It's kind of goes back to the last answer I just gave, right? It used to be where you didn't necessarily have to worry about it, back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Now, and everything was so regulated back then and so forth. Well, now with it deregulated, with it being decommissioned at a pretty good clip at this point, yeah, and the other thing about the compliance is, those aren't static either, right? Those compliance requirements change. So we have a whole team internally that's always looking at those, not only to make sure that we remain in compliance of what we have, but what others are coming up on the horizon that we need to focus on, and then we need to make sure that we are prepared for. So yeah, we are very focused on the compliance side of this equation.
Okay, and it looks like we actually might have time for one more question.
Okay,
Um,
one more.
does the system send out notifications when a line goes down? Interesting
Yes,
question.
100%. Yep,
Perfect.
absolutely. So that is part of the notification configuration. So there's two ways you
Hmm.
can see that. You can get a notification either by email or SMS, and I've kind of already talked about that a few times. On the actual AirDial device itself, there's an LCD panel, and you could
Hmm.
see on that LCD panel that if a line has gone out of service too. So there's a couple
Hmm.
ways you can do it, but yeah, absolutely, we can send a notification if one goes out of service.
Hmm. Perfect. Well, Clinton, it looks like we're just about out of time. Thank you so much again for sharing this information with our audience. And a special thank you to Ooma for sponsoring this webinar. And of course, to our attendees for joining us today. I also want to thank everyone for submitting questions. And if you have any other questions, you could follow up with Ooma's team. A recording from today's session will be made available on our magazine's website, Facility Executive, and on Ooma's website as well, ooma.com. Well, thank you everyone so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.